Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Ashley Tate. From the world of television comes one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, featuring a group of 6 people whose lives intertwine through personal relationships, love, heartbreak, and comedy, becoming the hottest TV show of its era and launching the Hollywood careers of the cast for years to come. We're talking about Friends. Friends was a sitcom created by David Crane and Marta Kauffman that premiered on NBC on September 22, 1994. The show was developed in late 1993 under the title Insomnia Cafe, then 6 of 1, Friends Like Us, and finally, Friends. The show followed the lives of 6 friends in their 20s and 30s, living and working in New York City. The 6 were involved in each other's lives on a day-to-day basis, and those relationships formed the foundation of the series. The show's primary character in the beginning was Rachel Green, a young woman who runs from her wedding and eventually bumps into an old friend, Monica Geller. Rachel becomes a waitress at the Central Perk coffee shop and moves into Monica's apartment upstairs. Rachel's introduced to Monica's group of friends, Phoebe Buffay, Joey Tribiani, and Chandler Bing. The group also includes Monica's brother Ross, who, unbeknownst to her, had a massive crush on Rachel during high school. A major focus of the show inevitably becomes the relationship between Ross and Rachel, whose on-again, off-again love affair carries the show from one season to the next. Though each character becomes involved with other love interests along the way, they remain connected and eventually have a child together on the show. Monica and Chandler become an item also, and the two eventually marry on the show. The same is true of Phoebe, who does find her soulmate by the end of the series. Joey, who is a lovable but dim-witted ladies' man, stays single and continues to play the field throughout the run of the series. Though the show began with a slow burn, it became the most-watched sitcom of its time. The show brought big ratings to NBC and led the cast to negotiating very lucrative deals, which made the 3 female leads the highest-paid TV actresses of all time. Friends was a smash with fans and received 62 Primetime Emmy nominations and won 6, including Outstanding Comedy Series in 2002. The show ran for 10 seasons, and the May 6, 2004 finale was watched by 52.5 million people, making it the 4th most viewed finale of all time. Thanks to the chemistry between the cast, the lighthearted storytelling, and relationships featured throughout, Friends remains one of the most popular and trend-setting series of its time. It continues to be hailed as one of the funniest, most iconic sitcoms ever made. And that's the lowdown on Friends. I think we've probably all heard the term popcorn movies. I know I have. It's the idea that, hey, I'm getting ready to go see something. It's probably big budget. It's probably a lot of special effects, probably a whole bunch of green screen. Maybe it's sci-fi, maybe it's not. Who knows? But basically, it's an action film. It's something over the top. Maybe it doesn't have a whole lot of heart to it. And hey, for all we know, there's no story there at all. And maybe, just maybe, the acting is pretty crap. But it's a popcorn movie. Not supposed to be deep thought. Not supposed to be a whole lot of grand acting going on. And maybe no Oscars are going to be won by this particular movie. I think there's merit to popcorn films. I enjoy some popcorn films. I'm a fan of The Expendables, which is nothing but a popcorn franchise because trust me, kids, there's no deep meaning behind any of those films. I'll promise you that. But it's a guilty pleasure. It's something I enjoy watching. And you know what? Life's too short, kids. Do whatever makes you happy. I do believe in such a thing as popcorn TV also, which leads us to today's topic, which is Friends. Now, none of that intro is meant to bag on this show. It's not meant to put it down or say it's not fun. The whole point of a popcorn anything is that it's fun. Friends is fun. And that's what I'm kicking off with here today. Friends is supposed to be fun. It is. And there's a little bit of drama. There's a little bit of heart. But there's just a whole lot of laughter, which makes a great sitcom. And for me, Friends is a great sitcom. So that's where I'm heading into today. Ashley, you're in luck because this particular show is all about the 6 friends. Big cast. I don't know if any of us knew who any of them were before this started. I knew, Courtney Cox from the Bruce Springsteen video. It's the only thing, I think it's the only way anybody knew her, but I wasn't aware of any of the rest of them. The whole world knows who they are now. So I'll let you come in hard on this. What do you think about Friends overall? Where does it rank for you in terms of your favorite sitcoms of all time?
It's probably like I don't know if I would say it's my favorite show, but it's definitely up there. It's my comfort show, my go-to show, whatever's going on in the world, especially the last 2 years. Just getting something familiar that's gonna make you laugh. I feel like it's the type of show that if you get into it, after a while, they start to feel like your friends too. And so their, triumphs, the things that make them laugh and make them smile, make you laugh and smile. And it's always just like this comforting place you can revisit when need be. So it's a show that's near and dear to my heart and probably at least top five, if not, maybe number two.
What would be number one then? What beats it?
Well, at the risk of making me look like a loser even more, probably I would have to say Gilmore Girls. And I say that
Oh,
because, that whole small town vibe of that show and just like the quirky, small town characters just kind of drew me in and were like a little security blanket. And so that show is just something that like when I need to just feel like comfortable and homey or a good laugh, I will also watch that show. And it kind of surpassed Friends at some point. I'm not really sure when, but so I'd say it's probably a good battle between those two shows.
man, Gilmore Girls is a classic white girl TV show if I've ever seen one. I'm just saying, whole bunch of white women on that show, buddy.
Well,
So,
yes, that is true. I will say so, you know, Friends and Gilmore Girls both, I feel, besides that the fact that they were both Warner Brothers shows, both kind of didn't age well in that way. Like when you look back on both of those shows as classic and great as I think they are, and I love them so dearly, there is a lack of diversity kind of across the board on both shows. And when you look back on shows like that, it's kind of, some people would argue that that keeps them from being considered timeless because they don't translate as well into today as they did at their peak. But Friends a little bit more. I think Friends still kind of skirts past a little bit more than Gilmore Girls, but that would be the one thing about both of those shows I would say would be problematic is the lack of diversity across the board in casting and characters.
like I'm aware of all this, and it's something I've kind of had to reconcile in my mind that while I still enjoy watching the show, I do have to remind myself, wow, there's like no black people here at all. And but like you said, at the same time, it I don't want to say if it's a product of its time because that's not very fair because you had Fresh Prince of Bel Air. It's not like you couldn't do that. I mean, it's not like you couldn't have like diverse cast or whatever. I mean, it's entirely possible. They've done it for years. But yeah, I don't think I've ever thought about the concept of, hey, this prevents this from being a Mount Rushmore sitcom because of that. Is there an asterisk by this show because of that, you think?
I do, and I hate to say it because it's like I said, one of my favorite shows, but you know, I could look at that show and I can see myself represented in those characters, but that's me because I'm, a white girl. That's not the same for a lot of people. And so I think that that kind of left people out. I mean, I know there's people from, all different walks of the world who love Friends. Like, I don't think it necessarily kept it from being liked by other cultures, but that everybody like kind of was drawn to the show because of like their bond, their friendship, and we all as people want that connection, we want that friendship with other people. That translates across the board no matter what. But if I'm looking at that show like as a young girl when I started watching it, I can see myself in Monica, I can see myself in Rachel, I can see myself in Phoebe, physically, we can share characteristics of hair color, skin color. That's not the same for, everyone who watched the show. And I feel like, back then, yeah, they had Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which was a great show and popular show, but like shows were still kind of segregated back then. Like,
Mm.
they kept it separate instead of, intertwined. Like when I went to high school, there were 39 different ethnicities represented at my high school. So when I watched
Wow.
Friends, it almost like wasn't a representative of my life personally, where I went to high school and grew up in San Diego, California, because all of the cast looked the same, and that was not my experience growing up. I very rarely was around large groups of people that looked like me, and I thought that that was the norm. But then as I grew up and talked to other people, met people from different cities and states, I realized it wasn't like that, and then a lot of people grew up like how Friends is depicted, just a bunch of you know white people hanging out, having a good time, versus then on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, it was different. So I think that them keeping it separate, unfortunately, kind of made sense for how TV was back then. But I don't know that that is as relevant today because, it's not realistic. We're all more intertwined and intermixed, which is great. And it would have been nice to see Friends done that way.
Man, I was just sitting here because we often do this on this show. Is like we fantasy book things. So in my head, I'm fantasy casting or trying to fantasy book Friends if it premiered now, if it started now. How radically different this cast would look now compared to '94. God, 27 years. Good Lord,
Yeah.
that's insane to me. I can't get my head around that. But as we said at the intro, I do enjoy watching the show. And again, folks, we like to just be full disclosure here. I don't like to sugarcoat anything. I mean, if something has issues, we'll address them here on the show. We do like to talk about stuff we love. This is a geek culture podcast, as everyone knows. So, and I'm glad this came up early. That way, we can kind of get out of the way and continue with the same. But I think it's good to address this. So the original title of this thing was supposed to be Insomnia Cafe, among other things. So as the story goes, David Crane and Marta Kaufman, and if you've ever watched this show more than one time, those names pop up together. I think
Right.
at the beginning and end, I think both. But the co-creators of the show supposedly wrote a 7-page pitch for a new sitcom titled Insomnia Cafe. So in addition to the different title, the plot itself was quite different from what came to be known as Friends. And here's a mind-blowing concept for you. Ross and Rachel were not the key relationship. Instead, Joey and Monica were supposed to be love interests. So how messed up is that?
Right? I can't even picture it.
I mean, they flirted. Did they flirt with Monica and Joey in this show? I don't think they ever went there, did they?
They did in the beginning, and then there was a flashback episode where they kind of show how Joey joined the group, and there was kind of
Yeah.
some chemistry and flirting happening between him and Monica when he moved in with Chandler. But I just feel like they didn't have the same chemistry. Like Ross and Rachel had the chemistry from the get-go. So I feel like it made sense that they rolled with that dynamic and ditched the Monica and Joey. Because I mean, if you think about it, Monica and Chandler even had more chemistry than Matt LeBlanc and Courtney Cox did, at least how I felt watching the show. So I think that they were smart to ditch that original idea.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I ever felt Chandler and Monica together. So
What?
no, I'm serious. Something about it just didn't. I'm not saying it didn't work for me because, you get familiar with looking at something and then it grows on you. And then you become, oh, okay, well, these two are supposed to be. But in the beginning, I kept thinking, I don't know. I don't know if I saw that as the absolute best fit for me. I don't know. Something about it didn't, their personalities didn't seem to fit.
I think
I
it
don't
made
know.
sense. I think it made sense in the dynamic of when you've been friends with someone for so long and you laugh with them and they get you, and sometimes it's just a seamless kind of transition to where you see that person in a new light and then it goes from there. I don't know that Matthew Perry would have had great chemistry with anyone, honestly. I mean, I guess if I had to pick out of all of the girls, I do feel like there was a little bit of chemistry between him and Jennifer Aniston, but I don't think he had that same kind of palpable chemistry really with anyone. So I feel like it was going to kind of fall flat regardless of who his love interest would have ended up being.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I won't argue that. That's fair. Let's get into this cast because we've already mentioned two or three of them right off the bat. Let's kick it off with Jennifer Aniston as Rachel Green. a lot of times on this show, as we again, we'll fantasy book, fantasy cast, and we'll say, well, this person was born to play this person, and this. I don't want to do that this time because I feel like again, a lot of these folks were unknowns. At least to me, I wasn't familiar with anyone except just one. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, here's who should have played her. We'll just roll with what we have. If you've got any ideas about who maybe you would have perhaps cast, hit me with it. But Jennifer Aniston as Rachel Green, I don't. To me, she is Rachel, and again,
Yeah.
who else would you have gotten? Because hindsight 2020, you don't know now how anybody else could have done. It's not like it was a role that was recast and then she stepped in. But when I think Rachel, I think Jennifer Aniston. I don't even think of another actress. I don't know how I could. I mean, it seems to me she's perfect for this. What do you think about Jennifer Aniston on this show?
I thought she was great as Rachel, and I kind of agree with you there. I know she had done a little bit of stuff before Friends. Like I think she had actually just filmed a season of another show before she got moved, did the whole Friends thing. Some show like about a diner. I used to know the name of it. I can't think of it right off the top of my head. But, like you said, nobody really knew who any of these people were, save Courtney Cox being, in the music video. And so I feel like they, the show just kind of morphed itself around them to the point where like, that's when I think of Monica, I think of Courtney Cox. When I think of Ross, I think of, I'm blanking on his name. Oh my God. What's his name?
Wait, who you?
Yeah. I, that's who I picture. And so like for Rachel, I mean, she just nailed it. Like, she just had the look, the attitude, just everything. I mean, I feel like everybody wanted to be Rachel at some point, at least all of us girls watching the show.
And interestingly enough, they wanted Courtney Cox to be Rachel to begin with.
I couldn't see that at all.
Yeah, well, evidently she couldn't either because she said no.
Yeah.
But she wanted the role of Monica because she liked that Monica was a strong character. So there you go. Yeah, you're right. I can't picture that at all. Well, let's dive into Courtney Cox then as Monica Geller. She absolutely fits this. I sort of that. I mean, can I say neurotic, OCD? Everything's got to be a certain way all the time. She annoys me so much in this show. And it's like, it's the old pro wrestling thing. Well, I really hate that guy. Well, then he's doing his job. He's a heel. So it's kind of the same thing here. I really find her annoying. It's like, well, she's supposed to be annoying. That's her character. Like,
right.
Perfect. Courtney Cox.
Well, and I think that she did it so effortlessly. Like it doesn't feel forced. When she's portraying Monica, I feel like if they could, if they had casted that wrong, I don't think that character would have been as popular as she was. Wow. Because there's a fine line between annoying and bothersome and like endearing, and you love them despite the fact that they're a neurotic OCD clean freak. If you think of like Saved by the Bell or Family Matters, like Urkel and Screech were also odd, annoying people you kind of didn't really like but did like, but kind of rooted for but didn't, but not in the same way. Like Monica still had that same quality. Like you said, if she was irritating, you wouldn't necessarily maybe want to live with her or date her because of that personality, but you still cared about her and you still like wanted to see where her story went. And I don't know if they had put the wrong person in that role, I don't know if they could have pulled it off in that way.
Yeah, good call. And she fits the role. And here we are 2 for 2 saying this stuff, but she really does. And maybe it's just that she does, or just that after all these years, we can't envision anyone else being that character. But man, she's so good in this. It's definitely, and we'll get into this later, the idea of it's just the best. I hate to hit you with this early, and I'm not trying to, but part of me says, is this the best that any of these people are going to do? Is this show? Not that they're not talented, but man, so much good stuff happened here between the 6 of them. But we can address that toward the end. That's kind of a big question. So as far as the ladies go, we rounded out with Lisa Kudrow as Phoebe Buffay. I am not a fan of this character.
A lot of people are not.
I'm not. And it's nothing against her. For what she's supposed to do, she's fine. But I'm just not I don't get it. I don't. There's many episodes where I'm thinking, okay, I know why Monica's in this scene. I know why Rachel's in this scene. I don't get why Phoebe's here. Like she's kind of like the Hawkeye of this team. Like we don't really know why Hawkeye's here. All the rest of these guys have superpowers, and Hawkeye's got arrows. So for me, Phoebe's the Hawkeye of Friends.
I could see that. I mean, she served a purpose. Like, she rounded out the group, and she was kind of like the eccentric. Like, Rachel's very typical, like, popular, average. I assume they were going for, like, average American girl. Monica's a little, to the left of that. She's more neurotic, OCD. She, used to be fat. Now she's not. Like, that's kind of like her thing. Phoebe's was more like, we got to pull in like the girls who don't fit with Monica and Rachel. They needed somebody that, they could look at the group and say that they had an oddball, because otherwise then it would be kind of cliquey, right? It would be like high school. Like that was I feel Phoebe was their attempt at being inclusive.
Is she the ugly friend?
She's not. I think Phoebe's really cute. I don't think any of the girls were ugly, but I mean, comparatively, when they like how they cast them, like, Monica and Rachel are kind of similar in height. They both have the darker hair, so like those kind of classic features. Lisa Kudrow isn't unattractive, but I think when you stand her next to Courtney Cox and Jennifer Aniston, she's taller. She's kind of just has different features. Like, I think that was like their intention, not for her to be the ugly friend, but she was supposed to be like the more average friend.
Yeah, and that's what I meant by that. Ugly in terms of this whole idea of like the pretty popular girls having I know it's bad, but have an ugly friend, and it's like a counterbalance. So they want to put that in this show, and it's to show you, hey, that they're really beautiful, but they're kind of normal, and they have this normal, average looking friend. But like it just kind of hit me, was she inserted as maybe homely's a better word? Again, not that she is. It's the idea of it, the concept of it, the personality of it. Like she's not like a runway model kind of pretty.
Right. Well, and I think that's why, Phoebe's character was quirky and kind of out there. But I also think that's why they kind of made her fashion choices more out there and oddball compared to the girls, because it kind of dressed her look down compared to the other two girls, and kind of drove that point home that like Phoebe's the girl that is part of the group who's not, as normal or popular, but she's still part of our group. Like, that was them showing like, anyone can identify with our group we have here, whether you're weird or not weird. So
right. So favorite female character, which of the three for you?
Oh, that's a hard one. It's a really, really like hard call between Monica and Rachel. I love Phoebe, but like you said, I don't feel like she got the same kind of story arcs as the other two girls did. And, I guess if I had to pick, I would say probably Rachel. I feel like I identify with her more than I do Monica.
See, for me, I would say Rachel, because I'm the dude here and I'm kind of biased because I think Rachel's exceptionally pretty. But I don't want to pick her because of that. So for me, because I was once really heavy and now I'm really not heavy, I kind of look at Courtney Cox's character and I think, man, if I have anything in common with any of the women, it would be her. Where it's like, even though I've lost weight, I still have that mentality of I still don't look good. This doesn't fit the way it should. Am I getting fat again? And it's that idea of, if I could have a conversation with one of the three of them, I mean, Rachel's the one you'd like to hang out with because, again, wow. But then you look at Monica and you're like, hey, I might have something in common with her. So for me, it might be Monica, even though she does annoy the crap out of me most times I watch the show.
I think that's a solid answer, though. I mean, I think Monica's character has more depth, although I do feel like the show kind of, jumping back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show about how, some things wouldn't age well. I don't think their fat jokes would have aged well either, or haven't aged well.
Good
either.
call.
Like, some of the jokes they make about Monica, or like her family dynamic and the way they treat her because she was the fat sister, that kind of stuff, I don't think would, really translate to a new show in 2021, but like, yeah, I think her character has probably more depth than Rachel, but I feel like Rachel is the more relatable one for me and probably most women, just because she's just the average woman. She's nice, she's sweet, she just wants to find a good guy and, get married, and, she's just a nice girl.
And you know what? Not for nothing, but if this show were made today, Monica could still be heavy.
Oh yeah,
And
and they
you know what I
probably
mean?
would keep her heavy because of, that would kind of be more relatable, with the body positive movement, and there's not as much of a stigma around being heavier in 2021 than there probably was in 1994, so I could see that.
Yeah, it's a terrible habit I've developed over the past several months of trying to either rewrite or recast. I got to cut it out. I don't know what to. It's the whole pro wrestling thing, kids. It just screws with the wiring in your head. I can't help it. Um, let's talk about the guys on this show. Matt LeBlanc is Joey Tribbiani. I've seen
Yeah.
some stuff that he's done after the fact, and I don't hate it. But for me, I don't know. This goes back to that question a few minutes ago. I don't know if I've ever seen him do anything that I enjoyed as much as this character. What do you think Joey Tribbiani brings to this group of friends, that besides the obvious that he's kind of a dunderhead, he's kind of the Patrick's star of this group, but what else does he bring to this besides that, you think?
Well, I think, he's kind of like the heartthrob, I mean, Ross and Chandler, they're not bad looking guys, but Joey's more the classic good looking, he's muscular. His character doesn't really have any issues with the ladies getting a date, so I think he's supposed to be that like typical guy that most girls would go for. The guy who's like sweet, funny, kind of unattainable because he doesn't do relationships, but not a bad boy, but not like as good a quote unquote seemingly good of a guy as Ross and Chandler, although I'd argue out of the three of them he's probably still the better of the three guys.
And plus, I wonder, like, does this character know that he's kind of dumb? Like, does he get it? I mean, has he been like, a lot of the humor is like self-deprecating, I think, at certain times, but like you almost feel like he's a John Cena type, where like he is ripped and he's really good looking, but then he can kind of be a little bit of a doofus, but he kind of knows he is. I wonder how much of that for this character is real, or is it put on because he's used to being that. Maybe it's a mix of both.
I think so, because if you watch the earlier seasons, like the first season, he doesn't come across as much of a goof as he
Yeah.
does as the seasons progress. Like the first couple episodes, like I think like one of the first or second episodes, they're all sitting in Central Park and they're having kind of like a philosophical conversation about dating and life. And he's keeping up. He has ideas. He has theories. He doesn't seem like the dumb one of the group. But then as the show progresses, he kind of gets dumber and dumber as seasons go on. So something happened, whether, I don't know if it was his idea, their idea, somebody decided like, oh, let's make him, not as smart as the other guys. I mean, there's those a couple episodes where they even kind of reference it, like where he has word of the month toilet paper, and that's why he knows big words, and he buys the encyclopedias, but he only buys V because he wants to know about the volcanoes and be able to participate in conversation. So I think they just kind of ran with him being, lighthearted and goofy, which made him endearing. But at the, compared to the first season, it really kind of was like a big change.
Yeah, it was. It kind of felt like that. It kind of reminds me of Don Knotts' character Barney Fife from the Andy Griffith Show, because the first couple seasons of that show, Andy was kind of the half-wit and Barney was the straight man. And then suddenly, I think by season 3, I think it was, suddenly Andy's the straight man and Barney is the comedy relief. And it kind of switched at the last second for some weird reason. But yeah, maybe it was just a matter of it was getting laughs, because a lot of this show was filmed before a live studio audience, with the exception of the cliffhangers.
Right.
So maybe it was just the reaction. He was getting a pop. So it's like, hey, we should keep writing that character this way because it's working,
Well, and him and Chandler were kind of like the more buddy buddy, even though Ross and Chandler knew each other longer.
Right.
Him and Chandler were more buddy buddy because they were roommates. And so Chandler was very witty, very smart, very snappy with the comebacks, for that dynamic to work. Joey kind of had to be a little bit less than Chandler as far as intelligence goes. Otherwise, Chandler wouldn't seem as funny or as witty compared to Joey. So I feel like they
Good
also
point.
had to kind of push that.
Good point. Yeah, good. That's a good one. Matthew Perry is Chandler Bing. Uh, again, very good at what he does. Excellent job here. I mean, he's just none of these characters are perfect, no matter how pretty they might be. They all have flaws. Sometimes the flaws are like serious relationship flaws where they can't progress from one person to the next, which makes them very human, which is nice because a lot of these situations, of course, are ridiculous.
Right.
How in the world do they afford this apartment? Don't get me started. That kind of thing. But he does have his flaws, but man, I don't know if he's my favorite. Uh, I don't know. That's we'll get to that
I
in a second. But what do you think about Chandler?
I think that, without Chandler, I don't know that the show would be as great as it was at the time.
Mm,
Like, he really was, especially in those earlier episodes, like he was really the one pulling the laughs. Like, as the
yeah,
season
yeah.
went on, Monica had some good one-liners, Rachel had some good ones too, but Ross, everybody. But in the beginning, Chandler really carried the one-liners that were kind of perfect. And I think he was relatable. He was very unlucky with love, and the whole Janice dynamic was
Oh
hysterical.
my
Like,
God.
I think he was just kind of like, the he just kind of made the show. He kept it lighthearted. Him and Joey, especially together, because Joey was so goofy and Chandler was so good at, making fun of whatever Joey was doing. Their friendship, I feel like, really made the show. Like, their bromance was like, I can't imagine Friends without it. So I mean,
Yeah.
and they had good chemistry and he was funny. So I mean, I think it was a good role for him because I haven't seen him in anything since that I really just that stands out in my mind that I'm like, oh, I really like Matthew Perry, but I loved Chandler Bing.
Yeah. Wow. Good. Yeah, that's a good one. Um, I'm with you. I don't know if the show is as much of a hit without him. I don't, and if there's anyone else in this role, I don't know if it works. I mean, he's just so good. Uh, his father being a a cross dressing Las Vegas, I guess, singer, lounge lizard. Um, that, and we talked about diversity in the beginning. We have to give this show props for the whole homosexual thing. Was they didn't shy away from it at all in this show. Like they hit it head on.
So if in 2021, I think that it wouldn't have been seen as so progressive as far as like homosexuality, especially that like, yeah, Chandler's dad was a, part of an all male review in Las Vegas. And that, for them back then, yeah, that was very crazy for that to even be written into the storyline. But now in 2021, with cancel culture and with people being more aware of, and more supportive, I don't think that that would have been part of the show at all. And if it had been, it would not have been a punchline. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
the guys, Joey and Chandler, pretending to be a couple when they lost Ross's baby and they're down, at the transit authority trying to figure out which baby is Ross's, and they're kind of wrapped around each other and they're like, oh, we lost our baby. And then the person from the transit authority makes a joke about them being a couple and they kind of jump back from each other like, whoa. That was a laugh in 1994.
Very
That
true.
wouldn't necessarily go over as well, especially in front of a live studio audience in 2021. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. So they kind of confronted it, but they kind of didn't. I mean, you had Ross's wife who was a lesbian and cheated on him with another woman, and we'll get into that in a second. But
right.
yeah, again, you're right. It's not like they didn't confront it, but they kind of, I guess, for the time they did what they thought they could, but it
Exactly.
wasn't. And at the time, I guess it was a little bit more progressive than some other shows were doing.
Oh, definitely. Especially like you said with Ross's wife, like her story arc, that was pretty out there for 1994. Not so much for 2021 television, but for 1994, the fact that they kept her a part of the show
Yeah.
and her wife became part of the show, like that, that was pretty I think that is a surprising.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of this particular topic, it's funny because the first couple of seasons of the show, there was speculation that Chandler was gay. And supposedly, as the story goes, that for the first table read for this show, that Lisa Kudrow was kind of surprised that Matthew Perry was reading this as in the voice and as a straight man and carrying himself that way, because she assumed from the reading the script that he was a gay character. And they kind of made it pretty clear in 97. The creators of the show flat out said, no, Chandler isn't gay, nor will he be gay. So they were, I guess, I don't know if the Monica thing happened not too long after that. Because of that, I'm not sure when the timeline is for that. But he does in the beginning sort of, because, it's sort of all the tropes of a gay person or a gay man. Like his hair's always nice and he's always dressed impeccable. He's always clean shaven. He takes care of himself, and his personality, his sense of humor, sort of all the cliched things that you would imagine a gay white man would look like and sound like. I mean, did you think in the beginning of this show that he was gay? Maybe.
I mean, I never really went there, but if they had made that part of the storyline, if, like you said, in 97 that he would have come out, on the
Mhm.
show, I don't think I would have been surprised for his character. Like you said, he had some of the cliche kind of things that are ambiguous, to whether could he be gay, is he not gay, and he never really had a serious relationship before he got with Monica. I mean, he had Janice, but he was always trying to get rid of her.
Of course.
So, I don't think I would have been surprised. I think that, that could have been something they could have explored later on instead of doing the Monica Chandler thing. That really would have rounded out their group a little bit more. But I probably, again, because of the time, it wouldn't have been probably as well received. But also, they kind of already had that arc going with Susan and Carol. So,
Right, right. Yeah, interesting things going on there. Just urban myths that happen, and legends that surround a show that ran for as long as this one did. This shit was on the air for 10 years, not for nothing, but man, a lot of shows are lucky if they get past the second season, much less the first. And then here we're talking about shows on there for 10 years, which is crazy. The last main cast member, of course, is David Schwimmer as Ross Geller. So for me, if I had to say which, and this is sort of just personal opinion here, kids, but Matthew Perry as an actor, I enjoy his stuff and I like the Chandler character. But for me personally, David Schwimmer is the better actor, but I don't like Ross's character because he's such an Eeyore. He's such a sad sack. He gets stepped on and run over so many times during the course of this show. To be honest, after a couple of times of this, it's really hard for me to root for this guy because I'm like, dude, you have to wake up eventually and realize that you're getting taken on a ride and get manipulated by every woman that you ever been with. I mean, enough's enough. Like in the end of this, he's no longer a sympathetic character for me. I'm getting tired of the same old shtick. Like, did the writing for you with this character in particular, was it going back to the well one too many times with the same mistakes he kept making through the course of the show?
yeah, and honestly, like, again, if you look at the earlier seasons, he is obviously down on his luck. His wife left him for another woman. He finds out he's going to be a dad, and they're already getting separated. Things that as an adult you could relate to that, and like, when you get married or things happen in your adult life, you don't always see them going where they're going to go. So I feel like right off the bat, that made him very relatable to a lot of the audience, but he still was like a normal guy in the beginning. Like, yeah, he had this like down thing, but he was kind of crushing on Rachel. He met Julie, things were looking up for him. He was a funny guy too, but like in some of the later seasons, the writing it was like you said, they're just piling on the things that are happening to him. He's whiny. And, younger me really loved Ross and Rachel. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, their story's so cute. Da 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 da. Older, wiser me looking back, Ross had a lot of red flags. He was really problematic. And I hate admitting that because I used to love Ross and Rachel. But yeah, I don't think the writers did him any favors.
Yeah, that's the thing for me. It kind of felt like the same angle every single season with this guy. I mean, he had the wife who was British, and like she refused to. because he calls her Rachel at the altar,
Right.
which is freaking awesome. And it's one of those moments where you can hear the audience audibly gasp. And
Yes.
I'm sure I did too. It's like, oh my God, is you really what he just said?
Yeah.
But man, talk about this idea of these two are absolutely supposed to be together, but they just cannot get on the same page. Life is getting in the way. It's messed up for both of them, but it's kind of obvious. It's obvious to the audience anyway, but they keep doing what they call taking a break and that kind of thing. That became part of the cliche of the shows. That one of the lines that everybody knew was
Right.
they're on a break, that kind of thing. I mean, as you're watching through this show, before you know the outcome at the end of this, first of all, did you watch all this as it happened, or did you go back and watch it after the fact?
So when the show started, I was 9 years old. So I wasn't really watching Friends. Then I didn't kind of jump into Friends until I was probably like 12 or 13.
Hmm.
And because I totally had the Rachel haircut, that everybody had. I totally, as soon as I was old enough to pick my own haircut, that was the one I wanted.
Right.
And then in high school, I kind of caught the tail end of it, right? The show was kind of coming to an end after 10 years, and I definitely caught those last few seasons live. And then, before streaming, you had to, if you wanted to rewatch shows when they weren't in reruns, you had the DVDs. So a friend of mine had, all of the seasons on DVD. And so I borrowed those from her. And then that's when I really got into it. And then of course, once it was on streaming, then, but no, I wasn't fortunate enough to catch the whole thing live, just probably like season 3 and on.
So, did you know when you went back and actually started really watching it? Did you know how it ended, or did that come to you after you went back and really started digging into it?
So I knew how it ended because I caught the last few seasons as they happened. And
Oh, I got
so
you.
I
Yeah.
saw how the show ended, but I didn't really get like how the whole Ross and Rachel dynamic because I missed the first couple seasons.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
like I knew they had dated because a lot of the or newer episodes kind of allude back to it. But I missed that whole buildup of the Ross and the Rachel. Will they? Won't they? Are they going to get together? The whole Julie fiasco and all of that. Like, so I missed that the first time around, and that was kind of crucial. Like, I think I really loved the show more when I got to see those first 3 seasons because I think those were the best seasons.
Yeah. All right. So I'm trying to retrofit that question into my knowledge of how you watch this show, but um, I mean, knowing what happened at the end. Spoiler alert, kids, they get together finally. But like, is that something that you kind of felt, or did it seem like this thing is doomed to fail because they can never get on the same page? Or did you kind of think, no, it makes sense that they have to end up together? It's the only outcome that's going to work here.
Well, after they had Emma, I was kind of
Yeah.
kind of rooting for them because, they had a baby and they still had that chemistry. But it did feel weird at the end because I was just kind of like, okay, like it makes sense. They have a kid and he doesn't want her to move and they like each other. But, once I got to go back to those first couple seasons and see the history, they went to high school together. They grew up together. He was in love with her for years and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they were this great couple for it was like season 2 and 3 and it was heartbreaking when they broke up. Like you just wanted to kick Ross's ass like when
Right.
but so yeah, without that buildup though, I feel like the whole everything else Ross and Rachel related from like season 4 and on just it just meh, it's not anything.
Yeah. It did feel weird when he had that apartment and she moved in with him for a while, but like they weren't together. That felt weird. And it's almost like, man, either put these two together or don't, because I'm starting to get annoyed by this. Because you kind of felt kind of rooting for both of them as a couple. But then I'm telling you, for me, every time this guy either screwed up or got the wool pulled over his eyes, I just didn't want him to win. I'm like, that's it. I'm not going to pull for this guy anymore because he never learns from his mistakes. But like, uh, I can't deny that the narrative of this show is driven by the relationship between these two. I mean, the overall premise of the show, of course, is the friends concept. We're going to be friends no matter what. Through thick and thin to the end, we're always going to be in each other's lives to some capacity, and this is awesome. But like the overall driving narrative underlying that is these two have to be together. Like they're just maybe star-crossed lovers is too silly of a term, but something like that. So I mean, it makes sense they would end up together. I'm going to give you mine before I ask you yours, so I'll give you a
Okay.
minute to think about it. But
Okay.
because I was thinking about this going into the show, my favorite moment between between those two, um, for me, it's a tie. Is the first time that she kissed him because she had, and you have to refresh my memory, she had realized that he had, what was it he had done for her, and she didn't know it till years later.
He was going to take her to her prom because at that
That's
date
right.
she thought that her date had stood her up.
That's right. And she didn't know. And when she found out she kissed him, that was freaking awesome. And the second moment for me was the end when she's leaving the voicemail on the phone and suddenly out loud she's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? And you can hear the city audience go, oh my God. Like they know that is the best freaking thing ever. That may trump the first kiss. So what's your favorite moment between these two?
I really love there's that moment they're on the balcony and Ross is like, I'm going to tell Rachel how I feel. I'm going to ask her out. And, this is right before she meets Paolo, the Italian guy, and right before he meets Julie. So you're kind of like thinking, okay, maybe he's going to tell her. She, seems receptive to this. Like she seems like she digs him too. And then like the cat comes out of nowhere, is like clawing his back, and like, he misses his chance, like to tell her like how he feels, which changes the whole next like season almost, because she goes with Paolo, he goes with Julie, and you're just, as the audience, you're just like so frustrated because you're like, they're perfect for each other. But I love that scene because he's so nervous and he's like, this is my moment, and then that cat just ruins it. And
right,
like it's just such a fun, lighthearted like scene, but it's such a pivotal scene because if he had been able to confess how he was feeling, things might have, have happened different for them. And then I would have to agree, like your picks were amazing. With the last scene when she's like, I didn't get on the plane, like, my heart was just like melting, my eyes were wet, like it was a great scene.
yeah, it was awesome. I'm thinking back about it. It's so hard to not get excited by that. I mean, it's just freaking great. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. So we can't not speak about the rest of this cast. That's your main cast, folks. You all know the six. So Gunther, who is the guy that works at Central Perk. He's a barista, obviously. But we lost the actor that portrayed Gunther this year, James Michael Tyler. Was that sudden? Was he ill? Because I don't know the story behind it. Did he have cancer, I think?
Yeah, he was ill for a while. That's why when they did like the HBO Max did like the reunion special, he wasn't there in person. He Zoomed. I think he was pretty sick by then, and that special was filmed like sometime like early 2021, I believe.
Right. I think you're right. And he always had a thing for Rachel.
Yes.
Refresh my memory. Did he vocalize that to her? Did everyone know that he had a thing for her? Did she know?
No, I think it was like one of those things where like the audience, like we knew totally. And like he kind of, occasionally would kind of say something to like that was so obvious to us as the audience because we knew how he felt. But Rachel would just kind of miss it completely. Like he offers to let her move in with him. And he's like offering it as a, you would live with me. And she just totally takes it as, she's like, well, where are you moving to? And he's like, never mind. Like, She
Right.
totally misses that it was like an invitation to join him in his apartment versus she's thinking he's moving and she can just take over his apartment. Where there's that one scene where he's like got up the nerve, he's going to ask her out, and this other guy beats her to it, or beats him to it, and asks Rachel out, and then you hear all these like dishes breaking in the background, like he's in the back of the coffee shop, just super frustrated.
Right. When you get down to the success of the show, it's crazy because at first it was just sort of mildly successful, then it gained a real following, and then it really becomes a time capsule for the '90s. If you really think about it, the fashion, the haircuts, the subject matter, the relationships between the six and between others on the show. But you know, I'm a firm believer in I got to get paid. Okay, if I'm doing a job and I'm bringing people to the table and bringing eyes to the product, as they say, I deserve to get paid. Well, man, let me tell you, they got paid. Again, one of the stories about this cast, among the many, many stories that have been flying around for years and years and years, is the idea that they got paid. So, as the story goes, in the original contracts for the first season, cast members were paid $20,500 per episode. Not a bad day at the office, kids, if you can get it. They received different salaries in the second season, beginning from the $20,000 range to the $40,000 range per episode. And then for the negotiations for season 3, they decided to go in together as a group. Warner Brothers didn't care for that, but what are they going to do, Ashley? They're going to show them the door? Like, that's by season 3, this thing's a certified hit. I
Right.
mean, that's crazy to me that they would, because it made the rounds. It made all the top news sites all over the internet and everywhere that they're going to demand all this money and they're probably going to get it. What do you think about this? Like, I can't say have they earned it. I can't imagine ever saying I've earned that much money, but I mean, is it fair that, hey, we're the ones bringing the ratings and all this stuff to this network? We deserve to get this, you know?
Well, I think it was fair because I think it kind of spoke to their kind of camaraderie that came. They said as once they started this, show together, it became like this huge phenomenon that nobody really thought it was going to take off the way that it did. And I think that spoke to their friendship because there's a lot of people that would have, been happy to be on the higher end of that salary scale and not cared if their castmates were making the same amount of money. So I think
Right.
while it could be seen as problematic, the asking for more money and this and that, I think that it was really cool that they went in and demanded that, hey, this is what we want. And it's across the board.
Right, right. Going in as a group is sort of a strong arm move, but I respect it because had it just been one or two of them, I mean, you know what how a network feels. A network feels like, hey, you make too much noise, we'll just recast you,
Right.
which would have been a horrible thing to do. But
Definitely. Yeah.
so as the story goes, the stars were paid 75 grand per episode for season 3, 85 grand per episode season 4, $100,000 per episode season 5, 125 season 6, $750,000 each for each episode, 7 and 8, and 1 million per episode per cast member in seasons 9 and 10, making the 6 of them and actually making the 3 ladies of the cast the highest paid TV actresses of all time, which is a shame because that wasn't true of the men. But as we know, women are undervalued and
Right. Right.
underpaid a lot of times. So kudos to the women for getting their money, by the way. But that's
And
good
I think,
stuff.
I feel like they were worth it, honestly, because look at how much money that show is still bringing in now. That
Oh,
show
of
has not been
course.
on the air in how long? And you cannot go to most big, stores without finding some sort of Friends t-shirt, merchandise, cup, whatever. They're in syndication on several networks. That show made Netflix shell out how much money to Warner Brothers to get this to keep the streaming for one more year
Oh my
before it
God,
got
yeah.
lost to HBO.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of like in the sense that like back then, yeah, people might have looked at him and like, gosh, they're paying them a lot for this show. But if you look back now on how much that money that show has made Warner Brothers and all these other people, they were just getting their part of it.
Right, right. I mean, again, I'm a firm believer in I got to get paid. If I'm doing the work and you're not doing the work, you're sitting back collecting money off of me. And it's the same idea of like a pro athlete. People give pro athletes a hard time. Well, he's a millionaire. They're all millionaires. I'm thinking, yeah, but the owners are billionaires. So let's keep this in perspective. I
Right.
mean, who's making the real money here? So no, I don't begrudge them that. I mean, my opinion may have changed over the years, but I kind of see the attitude of, hey, this show wasn't here until this show was here. And this show
Right.
wouldn't be this show without the six of us. People are tuning in to see us, which we've seen other shows fall apart because the cast didn't stick together. So, yeah, good on them for doing it. Um, do you have a favorite episode of this show? Can you narrow it down to one, or is that even possible?
Oh, I could give you two.
Give me,
So,
give me three if you can, if you want to. Give me
okay,
three.
top three. So, one would be the Thanksgiving episode where they're at Chandler and Monica are together,
Yeah.
and Monica's parents are coming over for Thanksgiving, and Monica doesn't want them to know that she's dating Chandler, and she's also living with him. Joey and Ross don't want to be there, because they want to go with Joey's hot roommate, with her dancer friends, and Rachel makes the trifle that's disgusting. And like, there's this one scene where it all unravels. Okay, the parents find out that not only is Monica dating Chandler, they're living together. Joey, bangs on the table. He's like, I want to go. And then Rachel's like, oh my God, I wasn't supposed to put beef in the trifle. And then Phoebe is yelling about Jacques Cousteau. And Monica's mom just puts her face in her hands and she's like, that was a lot of information in 30 seconds or whatever.
Right.
That episode I could watch a million times. Like, it makes me laugh every time. I probably could act it out for you, but every time I laugh. Like, it's just such a great episode. That one, and the one where Phoebe's trying to find out if she's pregnant or not with her brother's, embryos, and they have the game show on who knows each other better, the guys or the girls, and they bet the apartment and they lose. Like, that episode also, hands down, could watch a million times. And then probably, I don't know if I have a third. It's really those two. Like, if I probably, like, if I just jump into Friends, if I haven't watched it for a few weeks, I usually just start with one of those two episodes. Like, they're just so funny. I don't know. Those are my favorites.
That Thanksgiving episode, wasn't that the one she had the turkey on her head?
That was a different Thanksgiving episode, but also
Oh,
great. All of the Thanksgiving episodes are solid. Like, you can't go wrong with the
yeah.
Thanksgiving Friends episodes.
That's one of my favorites, just because it's absolutely ridiculous. And he tells her he loves her for the first time, and she's having to emote behind this turkey that she's
Right.
happy. And does she have like the big sunglasses on his head on the
Yeah,
turkey?
she's like dancing and like
Right.
she's yeah. That's a good one.
The one where was it Chandler puts all the clothes from the closet on at the same time?
Yes, that's a good one. The one
He's
where no one's ready. I think that's the name of it.
Yes, yes, yes. Um, what about the idea of all the episodes being called the one where and the one where? Like, how soon do people pick up on this? That wait a minute, this is like, you know what I mean? Like, how soon do people pick up on that? I wonder.
It took me a while. Like, it was not until I was streaming it until I could see the name of the episode, and then I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, there's like a theme. But I might be slower than your average person watching it. But I love it because it's literally like how you would describe that episode. You're like the one with, and
Right.
because like I said, I'm a self-proclaimed Friends fanatic. When I had my baby shower for my little girl, it was a Friends themed shower my friends threw me, and it was called the one where she has a girl, because I had
Oh,
two
that's
boys already. So
good.
yeah. So
Right.
I am a fan of the one where name for the episodes.
So supposedly NBC originally requested there be one main storyline per episode with a couple of minor ones, but the writers held their ground and insisted there be three storylines with equal weight. And so the idea of, this is the one. It's like remembering which show you watched. Oh, it's the one with the turkey. So that kind of stuck with them, and they just sort of kept rolling with that. So I guess that's fine. It's like that '70s show. I think all the episodes of that '70s show were named after Zeppelin songs and Zeppelin albums, I think.
Something like that. I like when the names of the show have something to do where it references something else, where it's not just like a boring name. Like another show I watched a long time ago, One Tree Hill, all of the names of their episodes were all songs. And music was a big part of that show. So like I like when the writers get creative with the naming of the episodes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something different, but yeah, it's God, there's so many cool moments from this. I think we could have done a whole hour on just moments from this show that were very funny. Um, what do you think was the saddest thing to happen on this show? Is there a moment for you that really you're in tears every time you see it?
Well, besides from the Ross and Rachel breakup,
Mhm.
because you could see like when Rachel, like Ross is crying because he's realizing that Rachel's not going to give in. She's not going to, say like, let's work on this. She's like, no, we have to be over. And she's crying like, their emotions, I just felt like were really just like out there for that scene. And that gets me every time, even though I know it's going to happen. Like, I know they're going to break up. That one, but besides that one, I would say when Monica and Chandler can't have babies, when they find out that Monica is infertile, and she's gets the call and she's just in tears because she's not gonna get to be a mom in that way. That was really sad.
Yeah, I mean, there's moments, and I kind of we get this thing out me talking about this popcorn show. I didn't mean to say there's no heart. It's just that I feel like whatever heart there is to the show is outweighed a lot by the situations, by some of the ridiculousness at times, the comedy, and that's fine. But there is some heart to the show. Do you think that everybody who was supposed to end up together ended up together, or was there a connection that you wish could have been made but wasn't?
I kind of was rooting for Joey and Rachel. I don't
Yeah.
like that they built them up so much. They were roommates. They had really good chemistry as well. And you could see that Joey's falling for her, and you can see he's such a good friend to her. She's pregnant and he's taking care of her. He's doing all of this platonically. He hasn't made his feelings clear. You just kind of see this side of Joey that you're just like, he's such a great guy. And then, fast forward, she moves back in with him with the baby, and they still have that chemistry. He's still that great guy, and then they get their chance, and it's just kind of like a joke, and then it's over. And so I kind of felt like they could have explored that a little a little more. I don't really buy how they ended their, time together. But I also really liked Monica and Richard.
Ooh, Tom Selleck, man. I'm an old school Magnum PI fan, so I was kind of on his side through a lot of this, I have to say.
Yeah, I thought they were good together. I liked them. And then I really didn't like Ross with anyone other than Rachel. I hated Ross with the college student he dated. I thought that was a horrible storyline.
Yeah, yeah. Oh God, for sure. We haven't even spoke about the guest stars. I'm so glad you brought him up. George Clooney and Noah Wiley were on this show.
Hmm.
John Lovitz was on this show. Helen Hunt, the same character that she played on Mad About You. I actually used to watch that show all the time, and I actually really enjoyed it. Those two shows crossed over a couple of times. Julia Roberts was on this show. Steve Zahn, Brooke Shields,
Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt, Adam Goldberg, Jean Claude Van Damme, uh, Charlie Sheen, Ben Stiller, Isabella Rossellini, Billy Crystal, and Robin Williams in season 3.
Yeah.
Which I'd forgotten about that one, if I'm being real about it. Totally
Yeah,
forgot
they
about it.
they had a lot of guest stars. And then when Julia Roberts was on the show, it's because she was dating Matthew Perry at the time.
Right, right. John Favreau, for fanboys out there, you know Fav for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
So I loved this character. I thought it was one of the coolest characters on this show.
I liked him with Monica too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, let's see who else. Charlton Heston, of all people, was on this show.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it just the list just keeps going on and on and on. Hugh Laurie, in other words, Dr. House himself was on here.
Yes, on the
Um,
plane to
yep.
London.
Reese Witherspoon, Bruce Willis, of course. We almost forgot about Bruno himself.
Yes.
Bruce Willis on this show. Susan Sarandon, Winona Ryder, Jason Alexander, Kirsten Davis, Brad Pitt, as you said, Alec Baldwin, Sean Penn. Have we mentioned Sean Penn?
No, that was Phoebe's sister's fiance that Phoebe briefly stole from her.
Yeah. Hank Azaria, Paul Rudd, who Phoebe ended up with Paul Rudd's character, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Christina Applegate, my God, we're gonna run out of time. This is crazy. So many different people in the show. Danny DeVito. Um, yeah, wow. I mean, it's the happening show, and when it's something's that hot, people just show up, kind of like Saturday Night Live. It just feels like, I don't know, the words ensemble cast. I mean, it rings true for this show. Um, what do you think is the lasting legacy of this show? I mean, is this it? I, Before you answer that, here's what I'll tell you. I kind of feel like this is one of those shows that I can just pick up and watch anytime. I don't have to be in a certain mood. I don't have to be doing a certain thing. I can either watch it or it can be background noise. It's kind of like putting on a particular record where I can just listen to it anytime. That's how this show hits me. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think the lasting legacy is? Is it going to be remembered for being that kind of show? Is it a time capsule of the 90s, or is it everything and all that put together?
I think it was a time capsule of the 90s, but I also think it was just, you really felt the friendship amongst the six of them. Like, obviously, it was written into the show, but you could tell that they were friends outside of the show. Like, they just had that energy. And I think, sometimes with like the world is like not, the funnest place, or you have a bad day, and like you said, you can just pick any episode, put it on in the background or watch it, and it's kind of gives you that like comfort vibe. You laugh or you cry depending on what kind of episode it is, but it gives you like a kind of comfort of, like you feel like you're part of their lives, the way the show's filmed, the way they tell the story. It kind of invites you in, and I feel like that's why so many people were drawn to it, because it's not just funny, it's not just sad, it's not just anything. It's kind of a perfect mix of everything.
Yeah. If I don't want to say there's a dark side to this show, because I don't know if I've ever heard of a scandal or heard of anything that's come out. I mean, there's been very minor things here and there, unless I'm missing something. But a couple things that have come out in the years immediately following this show. LeBlanc actually came out publicly and talked about he barely left the house after the show ended. He was burned out. He didn't want to schedule. He didn't want to be anywhere. He just wanted to be home. And like most actors call their agents and say, "Hey, what's going on?" He'd call his and say, "Please lose my number for a few years." And he described it as being a dark time, which it's Joey. You don't really think that about him, but.
Right, right.
And then David Schwimmer also had sort of the same story. It's like he was struggling with the fame, and it was said it, in his words, it messed up his relationship to other people in a way that took years for him to adjust to, become comfortable with. And it just that idea that like, and then there's this story of Jennifer Aniston almost did not come back for the last season because, she was getting over as an actress. She was getting really big. And she had hesitations. And she said in a couple of quote, I had a couple of issues that I was dealing with. I wanted it to end when people still loved us and we were on a high. And then I was also feeling like, how much more of Rachel do I have in me? But then she agreed to do the final season. I mean, if she's not in the last season, then the last season is the one that she's in, right?
Right. Agreed. Well, I think, like you said, I don't know that I would call it a dark side of Friends, but there's that whole dark side of fame. I think people don't realize that, yeah, they're getting paid a lot of money to do their job, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But especially now, as the world has progressed with like social media and our phones taking pictures no matter where we are, people feel like they have a right to other people's lives to some extent, and not just for celebrities. I'm talking people in general. Like they feel
Right.
like they know you from Facebook, so they have a right to have opinion on your life. If they see you out somewhere, they're going to come talk to you, and it might not be someone that you necessarily would have associated with pre social media, and so it's only magnified, or I should say multiplied, for at the level of like David Schwimmer, Matt LeBlanc, Jennifer Aniston. Like it's a lot. Probably was very taxing, to deal with. You couldn't probably leave their house without being swarmed by people, and that's exhausting. So, I mean, look at Matthew Perry. I mean, I would say if there was a dark side of Friends, it would be him, his story. the fact that he just got so messed up with pills and other
Right,
things while
right.
he was filming, and that he, took it so personally. When I watched the reunion special on HBO, he said he took it so personally if he said a joke on the show and nobody laughed or
Oh,
not enough
wow.
people laughed.
Yeah.
I mean, and
That's
that's kind
crazy.
of sad. Like,
And he says he was never high on the set, and I don't think there was any stories that he was, but that he was usually really hungover,
right.
and it was a completely affecting his performance. And then when everyone started to see what was going on, that's when he reached out and got help. But like, yeah, that's crazy. What about some of the? I got to hit you with this before we wrap this thing up. What about some of the theories that have been out there for years? This idea that's been floated around the net for since this show, I guess, was on and then ended years later. That the show took place in a dream for Rachel. Like, have you heard that fan theory? What do you make of that?
I don't think I've heard that. Like, tell me a little bit, give me a little background.
I'd love to have something else for you, but that's all I got. This
So the whole
idea that,
idea is that Rachel, seemingly probably before she got married to Barry, or was supposed to, had this elaborate dream.
or maybe it was supposed to happen when she went out on her own and sort of took the chance and got away from her family and whatnot and decided to live on her own terms. That maybe she dreamed, well, this is what life could be like, and then the entire show is her in a life that never happened.
That would have been kind of cool. I mean, not gonna lie. If on the last episode, after the whole I didn't get on the plane, if it had cut to her waking up, in her wedding dress or something, and this whole,
Oh, wow.
10 years of development for Rachel Green had just been a dream, and she was really about to go walk down the aisle to the orthodontist Barry. Like, I feel like that would have been, I would have never seen that coming.
Yeah, it's and if you really want to get dark, it's like, she's maybe in a mental institution somewhere, and that's a whole other,
That's a whole other
idea of,
network.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's a very X-Files kind of thing, I think.
Okay, so going back to like problematic storylines or things that may not translate positively versus 1994 versus 2021, do you think it would be seen as problematic now in 2021, Monica having kind of seems like she slept around?
Ah, I don't know. I mean, because I think about now, if we're talking primetime network television, the answer is maybe. But then if you watch like streaming services, they don't hold back on those shows. There is some of those shows are as raunchy as anything you've ever seen in the 80s and probably worse. Like, I don't know. I think all that depends is it the same network? Is it a primetime slot? I don't know. Are they very tongue in cheek about it? They only mildly reference it. I think
Yeah.
the answer would be is it depends on how they handle it.
Well, I mean, they kind of like, you see it as the audience, right? You notice like from the first episode, she has a one night stand with Paul the wine guy. Like, do you think that it would, I guess I'm trying to like, I guess my question is, do you think that was that like a thing in the 1994 versus 2021? Like back then, were people more like open about having multiple like sexual partners, especially like on the first date, how she kind of seemed to have throughout the show before she was locked down with Richard and Chandler?
That's a good question. I guess it is very much a product of its time. Like a lot of the themes that they approach on the show and how they deal again with the topic of homosexuality and the gay jokes and all that stuff. So maybe the answer is yes, that is it is a product of its time. But would it be today? Um, Here's an answer that may not be politically correct. I don't know if the character were gay on the show in this day and age. Would it be okay if she slept around?
I
And I'm
mean,
not
I think in this day and age, I don't think it would be like as a big of a deal.
right.
But like, if you look at Phoebe and you look at Rachel, I mean, they kind of went on dates, and then it would allude to that they slept with, whoever they were dating, quote unquote. But Monica kind of jumped around a lot, and so I'm wondering, like, if back then in 1994, was that part of her, like, she used to be fat, so because there is that part of her personality that she was kind of gonna stumble and kind of get around before she found her person, whereas Rachel was the type of person who wouldn't have a one night stand and would expect to go on dates and be in sort of a relationship before jumping into bed, kind of a thing. You know, I just always kind of wondered about that because they don't really talk about it, but it's very obvious. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, I got off on a tangent.
No, it's
Continue.
fine.
Continue.
Totally, it's fine. Well, again, it's real hard to look back at stuff you enjoy that was made before now without glimpsing it with today's goggles on. It's kind of hard to not do that. So I see where you're coming from. Totally. Um,
Well,
other,
following. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say I was going to hit you with more fan theories, but what do you have on that train of thought though?
I was gonna say, with that same train of thought of like 2021 goggles, looking at 1994 Friends and all of that, like, do you think the Ross and Rachel storyline would have been as popular if it had unfolded in 2021 versus 1994? Because when I look back at Ross with my 2021, goggles on, as much as I hate to admit it, I see like red flag, red flag, red flag. Like Ross is kind of terrible as a boyfriend.
Right. Well, you're speaking from a woman's perspective. I've never looked at it from that point of view. I just
Well,
saw a guy who couldn't get it right, but you're seeing the other side of it, which is he's not a lovable loser. It's a lot of this is his fault, not what people do to him, but what he does to sabotage things.
right. Well, I mean, look at when he finally gets Rachel, right? He gets his dream girl, and this is everything he's been waiting for. Um, and then she starts a new job. And this is like a great thing for Rachel. Like, she's jumping into the fashion world with a legitimate job. She's not a waitress anymore. This is a good personal development for her character who's never really had to have a career before. And Ross immediately gets jealous, of that Mark guy. And he sends all those gifts to her office to kind of like mark her territory. And like, he has issues with her being at work when she's supposed to be spending time with him, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, back then, like when I watched it the first time, I'm like, oh, well, he just misses his girlfriend while she's at work. But like, from a woman's perspective, looking back on that now, it's like he was kind of jealous, kind of possessive, and like kind of, overbearing in that way. And like, he kind of pushed Rachel away. Like, he
Yeah.
was so afraid she was going to cheat. But like, he was just pushing her away because he was so overbearing.
Well, if you're going to sell it to me like that, then I completely see where you're coming from. Yeah, 100%. But here's how I was going to answer before I'm contemplating out all this stuff. Because my quick answer is yes, it still flies because people are suckers for a good love story, and
Sure.
the will they won't they has been a thing on TV since before I was a kid, and it's like it's probably always going to be a thing. People are suckers for that kind of story. So my first knee jerk reaction opinion is yes, it absolutely would still fly. But if you're looking at it now, I would probably say that Ross's character be written just a little bit more differently, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think they could have toned that down a little bit as far as like being possessive. So, I think that, looking back, I wonder if the writers would ever think about that too. The fact that he was just, kind of shot himself in the foot. And then he's the one that goes out and cheats on her. Like, he is so convinced
Right.
she's going to sleep with this Mark guy. And then he goes out and sleeps with that random girl from the coffee shop that he's at the bar with. Like,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, Ross,
Well,
go ahead.
I was gonna say there's not a man on the planet who watched that didn't immediately yell at their TV when they saw him do that.
Right? It's like the
Yeah.
stupidest thing he could have done. But then, I mean, so let's take Rachel. If you take Rachel out of the equation, like when he's with Emily and they're, in this new love and they're very impetuous and they're moving so fast, he's the one that's like, we should move in together. You should move to the United States. Let's get married. I'm in love with you and we should be together forever. Like, he's the driving force behind them getting married so quickly when they really shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. And then,
Mhm.
his other relationship where he dates that girl after Rachel and she shaves her head. Like, you know, as soon as her head's shaved and she's bald, now all of a sudden he's, has no qualms dumping her and going right back to for Rachel. So it's like if you look at him, if you pull him out of his, I mean, and he dated a student, so there's that also. So like if you
Right.
pull him out of his relationships and you look at his actions singularly and not for coming from the place of Ross, this beloved, Charlie Brown type character who just can't get it right, and the romantic with him and Rachel, he's kind of hot garbage as a character.
Right. Right. And honestly, and because this is where I was going with this with Ross earlier, this idea of fan theories, as sort of a background here, what happened to Ben? He completely disappeared after the 8th season. I don't even know if he ever talked about his son again. You never
Right.
see Ben and Emma on screen again. So there's this, again, kids, fan theory, grain of salt time. But there's this crazy fan theory that he lost custody of Ben because he was a bad father. That stuff that happened off screen that we weren't privy to was that his ex-wife Carol said, "I've had enough," and took full custody because, as you just pointed out, his idiosyncrasies and his faults as a man. I mean, try this list on for size. He sleeps with a student, tries to hook up with his cousin, asks a self-defense instructor for help scaring his female friends. He's jealous, he's possessive, and like, yeah, at that point, there's probably enough there to lose his kids. So you think that's what happened, maybe?
It could be, I would say, or, playing devil's advocate, because we've already established that I agree that Ross is garbage. But flipping that theory into being devil's advocate from the get go, it always seemed like Ben was Susan and Carol's baby that they just kind of let Ross hang out with.
Right.
Like, from even for when, she'd been with Susan, but not but a hot minute, obviously, because she was pregnant by Ross, and Susan's in the OBGYN, appointment. They're talking about names, and she's like, "This is my baby too," and da da da. So from the beginning, it was kind of like Susan and Carol were Ben's parents, and then Ross kind of was like their babysitter when they wanted to go out of town.
Ah, yeah, that's a good call. I hated that dynamic between the two women and the kid. Those were my least favorite moments of the show, and it had nothing to do with the whole, I'm in love with her relationship thing. I just, for me, I wasn't buying that she was so flippant about it. And I wasn't buying that. It almost felt like she had no heart. Like, can
Mm-hmm.
you not see that this man loved you more than anything in the world, and you are tearing his heart out? And it's almost like, forget the fact that it's a sitcom for a second. This character has no soul. Like, I never cared about her. I didn't care about a girlfriend. I didn't care about the kid. I never had a reason to invest in any of those three because the way they treated him. I don't even, was there even a moment when they acknowledged, "I know I tore you in half. I'm so sorry." Did that ever even happen?
I don't think so. I think they kind of have a little bit of a heart to heart right before she marries Susan. And she kind of, I don't remember exactly what she says, but something along the lines of, "It's not you, it's me." Like, it was never you, and I do love you and I do care about you, but I'm just not in love with you because I'm in love with a woman. I'm in love with Susan. So they kind of touched on it, but I think also because of their of the times, and you just didn't see that kind of a story arc being front and center in a lot of shows, that they kind of did Carol and Susan a disservice as well, in the sense that they just kind of made it seem like Susan woke up one day and was just like, "Okay, we're divorced. I met this girl at the gym and now I'm with her." When I'm
Yeah.
sure so much more went into that. There's probably her whole life, there's probably moments where she kind of questioned, and that led to that moment of her realizing, I prefer to be with a woman, not a man. And they kind of glossed over that whole, thing, which was probably would be a big deal in anyone's life, And so
Right.
I feel like they just were kind of tone deaf, in that whole, they could have written that whole dynamic between the three of them so much better.
Oh, I totally agree. I felt like I don't. Why do I come away from a sitcom not liking people? Like, if I do, they may not have been written very well. Um, for me, but I can't speak for anybody else, obviously. But yeah, I never cared about any of the three, even the kid. No offense to the kid, but I just wasn't into it. Um, we got to talk about this one thing because it's again this. I think this could be a 4-hour show just talking about the show itself. But um, we all know the opening credits. They're all on the couch, and I think it's Family Guy that talks about if you want to show how cool somebody is, just show them on a couch, and they're all hanging out on this couch or whatever. And it's the old Friends reference, but surprisingly enough, that whole opening scene was not filmed in New York. Shocker. It was filmed on a backlot studio at Warner Brothers Studios on a backlot. So, yeah, Dream
Yeah.
Crusher.
Well, I did know that, and I only knew that because 2 years ago, I went to at the Warner Brothers studio. You can take their backlot tour, and I did, and I got to see the fountain. I got to see the Central Perk set that had been moved to the studio and set up there, from their soundstage to a different area. And so I did see that the opening hadn't been filmed because that was like part of our tour, but it was really cool to see the Central Perk set and the studio where they filmed Friends and all that. That was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. So, of course, the intro, the couch, the fountain, all that stuff, them dancing around and whatnot. The Replacements, right? Is that the band?
Rembrandts.
The Rembrandts. Let me try that again.
Yes. The Rembrandts.
So the fountain, the dancing, the couch, the Rembrandts with "I'll Be There for You."
Right.
I had this. I'm gonna show my age. I had this single. It was a CD single of this song. Because I knew the song before I knew the show, and the song happened before the show.
Right. Right.
So I loved this song, and then it became the theme song to Friends. And the radio played it every 6 seconds. I said, yeah, I'm no longer a fan of this song. But I love that they never changed it. I love it's iconic. I love that it's connected to that show and always will be. And I do also hope, sincerely, that the Rembrandts band themselves are dirty, stinking rich because they've earned it. So
I'm sure they're still getting paid off that song.
Pay me the royalties is what I say. Belly up to the bar and pay me. Do you love this song? Is it old to you? Do you always love it? What's your take on it?
I love the song, but I knew it because of the show.
Yeah.
More so. I mean, I'm sure I heard it in the 90s, when it came out, because I was pretty into music, even though I was pretty young. But it sticks out in my mind because of the show. But it's a great song. But jumping back to something you said earlier about it being like a time capsule for the 90s, I mean, it's a very 90s song. But, they don't talk a lot about music that much really on the show. But when they did, they went to a concert and it was a Hootie and the Blowfish concert. So talk about being, in the 90s when that was filmed, I'm pretty sure they probably thought, Hootie and the Blowfish was going to be like this big thing. And well, I mean, they were for a while, but they did not have the same longevity as the show did.
Oh, man. So I heard Hold My Hand and heard on the radio, no one was playing it. And again, rushed down, bought the single. I took it to a bunch of different friends and said, dude, you have to hear this song. And everyone I knew was like, that's a pretty good song. I'm like, dude, I'm in love with this song. It's just so good. Next thing I know, mainstream radio has it. Everyone has it. They're playing it every 6 seconds. You can't get away from it. Soon I learned to hate Hootie and the Blowfish. And I'm like, oh, it's almost like this thing where I want to be in on the ground level, but when it takes off, I'm done with it.
You're no longer interested.
Yes. I can't have it be mainstream because if it is, I tap out and I'm done with it. So isn't it funny how that band is connected to this show and they were both so red hot at one time?
Right. And then the show is still like everyone, people still love it and watch it. I don't know that many people still love and listen to Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah. Darius Rucker got a career in country music, which I'll never be privy to because I'm not a fan.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, he, good on him. Great songwriter. But yeah, he's, again, it's just a microcosm of this show. But you're right. They didn't talk about music a whole lot on the show, which is interesting. The Apartment. I mean, okay. So are we all to assume that Rachel's parents footed the bill for this place? Was that ever revealed on the show?
So the backstory with The Apartment, from my recollection from the show, was that Monica subletted the apartment from her grandmother, who eventually passes away. So I would assume ownership of said, or the lease was still in her nana's name, but it was rent controlled. So whatever grandma was paying back in the day when she leased the place, that is what Monica paid, and that is how they afforded that apartment. Was that the rent never changed? Because there is an episode where Trigger, the super for the building, threatens to tell the owners of the building that Monica and Rachel are illegally subletting the apartment from Monica's grandmother.
Wow. So supposedly, the story is, and now this is, take this for what it's worth there, kids, but the cost of Monica's rent-controlled apartment in 2018 would be the price of about $4,500 a month. So
that's insane. I mean, rent in New York is crazy, but for that, I mean, that apartment seems so big on the show, like this big living room. I mean, even the kitchen was open floor plan, whereas from what I typically understand, most apartments in New York are very small and have like a galley style kitchen, which is just like basically a tiny hallway. Yeah. And so for it to have that big of an openness for the kitchen, a living room, 2 bedrooms with closets and a bathroom, that's pretty, that apartment should have cost probably way more than Monica and Rachel could afford to live there.
Exactly right. Yeah. And it's, it depends on what site you go to. There's different numbers. One site has the number at 6,500 based on the comparable size apartment in Greenwich Village, which is about $6,500 a month. Yeah, I don't know. That's insane. And it's one of those things where, like, I don't know how long it took people to actually for that to click. And it's almost one of those deals where it's like, did one person ask the question and then like a whole bunch of other people went, yeah, how much is it? Then it caused this fervor online where people are furiously typing away on their keyboards about, hey man, how come they can afford this? Like they're not even real. It's not even a real thing.
Right.
But we're all up in arms about it.
I feel like they did a better job explaining, finances as they pertain to Ross, Joey, and Chandler, because, Ross was a scientist. He worked at the museum. You would assume he's making a decent amount of money, for all the schooling and the things he was doing with the dinosaurs or whatever. Chandler has this financial job that nobody really knows what he does, but
right.
We do know he gets a promotion. I think it's in like end of season 1, season 2. And they're telling him he's going to be making substantially more money plus a bonus, and then Joey kind of mooches off of Chandler off and on for the whole show because he's a, out of work actor for most of the time. So all of their financials kind of track. I mean, Joey and Chandler's apartment's not as nice, it's not as big, but Chandler's got this great job and he has the savings. So that kind of explains how they stayed there the entire time. But the girls, Monica was in and out of chef jobs, and Rachel was just a waitress downstairs at the coffee shop. She couldn't have been making very much money at all.
Right. And supposedly on the show they were only paying $200 a month in rent. Is that the number that they revealed on the show was $200 a week?
I don't remember the exact number, but it was very low. It was I don't remember hearing a number, but it was supposedly the whole shtick was, her grandmother rented the apartment way back when.
Right.
And it just stayed that price.
$200 a month, and it's 1,100 square feet.
Right. 1,100. Well, just for perspective, 1,100 square feet, in San Diego for an apartment would probably run you, rental wise, I would say probably $2,100 a month.
Jeez, kidding me. That is triple my house payment. That's insane. That's yeah, I can't even with that. That's crazy.
And we're cheap compared to New York, so you can only imagine, how much it would be in New York.
Oh, right. That's crazy. Yeah, again, stories, tall tales, urban myths, things about this that doesn't make any sense. It's all very interesting stuff, kids. But again, remember, it is all just a sitcom. So, yeah, I feel like one day if we do a time capsule episode of this show for the 90s, that Friends will have to be included in that time capsule for sure. What else you want to hit on from this show? Is there anything anything you want to hit on, or We talked about favorite moments and who's your favorite Friends member. Is there a sad moment? Is there anything about this show that stands out for you besides just the episodes themselves, or anything that you always look forward to when you watch this show?
I just love seeing the cast's interactions with each other. I mean, Joey and Chandler will almost always make you laugh. The girls are pretty funny too. Like I feel like as the show goes on, Rachel and Monica get some pretty funny lines too. But at the very beginning, it was Phoebe and Chandler were really carrying the comedy of the show. And
Mhm.
by the end, they all kind of their comedic timing and the lines that were being written for them, they kind of spread the comedy around a little bit, which was great. So I just kind of looked forward to knowing that I'm going to laugh some point during the episode. Doesn't matter which episode I pick. I could pick any one and I'm going to laugh and probably be in a better mood than when I started the episode.
Right, right, right. Yeah, it's a fun show. I can't deny it. I mean, I still enjoy watching it. I mean, there's 10 years worth of episodes to dig into, so it's all good. So there's a little something there for everybody, I feel like. So let's narrow this thing down if we can. Give me your last word on Friends.
Um, Phenomenon. I don't think a show has been as wildly popular for so long while it was running and then in syndication since. Like there was no spin-offs, there was no, it was not like Law and Order, right? Where there's like a billion different versions and it's still going. It ended, but people still love it just as much as when it started, maybe even a little bit more. There's been no new developments to the Friends verse. As far as we know, everything that happened with those characters ended with that final episode where she didn't get on the plane. But people still love it and watch it. And some would argue more people watch it now than watched when it first, was a new show. And I feel like there hasn't been a lot of other shows that can say that about them, that they've stayed or gained popularity in their time since ending. So I just think it was kind of like a one shot, kind of an amazing deal. And it's one of my favorite shows.
Oh, well, now, if you're going to say spinoff, there was an attempt, and it didn't last
I did
long.
not know about this. Let me hear about this spinoff attempt.
Joey.
He had a show? How did I not know this?
Yes. Oh, you totally didn't know this.
I did not.
It premiered September 9th, 2004. And it went on hiatus. I returned in 2006, and then it was pulled when the ratings dipped. By August 23rd, 2006, it was off the air.
It was on for 2 years?
Well, it was on during that amount of time is when it was an actual show. But let's see, it was placed on hiatus, I think, partway through, and they changed the night and the time slot. They were trying their best to save it. But the basic story was that Joey struck out on his own and moved to Hollywood, hoping to truly make it as an actor. And he had reunited with his half sister, or with his high strung sister Gina. Moved in with his genius 20-year-old nephew, graduate student Michael, who is a rocket scientist. Which that must have been for some interesting comedy there. And yeah, that was the show. And I don't know that I ever watched the show, to be honest with you. I don't know if I even gave it a chance.
Now that you describe this, I feel like I've seen Matt LeBlanc I can picture the show, but I had no idea that it was related to Friends in any capacity.
Oh, wow, really? That's crazy.
Yeah, like I can totally see. I'm gonna have to Google when we're done here. I can totally see the the place they were living, and
Yeah.
I can see Matt LeBlanc, and like my brain's like, this show, but I don't remember it having anything to do with Joey or with Friends, and that's crazy to me. There's very few people who can give me Friends trivia or facts that I do not know already, because like I said, I'm a self-proclaimed Friends nerd,
Right.
and so you stumped me. I did not know about the spinoff show.
Yeah, that's crazy. And other shows have tried it through the years. Some work, like Golden Girls tried it and it didn't work. This is going way back, but MASH, they tried a spin off of MASH after the show called After MASH, and it didn't work. I mean, there's several. I don't. It's like trying to recapture the magic.
You
It's
can't
like,
do it.
yeah, it's like the sophomore album. I mean, the freshman album, like the debut album is so good. How in the world do you follow that up? Like I don't know. I just don't know if it's possible. That thing may have been doomed to fail from the jump.
I think so. I feel like if they were going to do a spin-off of a character that Joey on his own, that was kind of, like you said, it was doomed from the beginning.
Yeah, I think so. Well, there you have it, kids. There's the show for you. And as we said from the beginning of this thing, it's got its moments. It's got a lot of comedy. It's got a little bit of heart. It's got a lot of moments of, how could he? How could she? There's constant turmoil, whether it's real or manufactured, between these characters and other people on the show. But I'm telling you, if you want something that you can just put on anytime, it's like putting on a familiar album that you could just be listening to or have in the background, as we said before, and just enjoy it for what it is and get a laugh or two. And, life's too short, kids. I mean, you got to laugh it up eventually over something. And this show will definitely deliver that to you in spades today and hopefully in the future. And that is Friends. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.